The Enhancement Shaman's one of those specs where it went through massive changes from vanilla to TBC, and then from Wrath of the Lich King it really got built upon the changes in TBC to the point where it's now refined. With tons more buttons to press, lots less mana issues, and a very, very competitive DPS spec both on single target and on AoE, it really makes this spec stand out in Wrath of the Lich King. And if you're going into Wrath of the Lich King as an Enhancement Shaman, you're going to have a great time. We're going to talk about the changes to totems, we're going to talk about new abilities, new spells, we're going to go through the talents and look at how the talents have changed and what new talents there are. We're not going to look at every single one in detail, we're just going to look at the ones that have changed enough to warrant talking about. Finally, we'll then look at the glyphs, as well as I'll give you my commentary just a little bit on how I enjoy it, will you enjoy it, and is it overall a competitive, good spec to play. Now, if you haven't seen the restoration video, then this is definitely worth watching. This is going to be all the totem changes that really are relevant that you really need to know about. So I'm just going to play that while I go and make a cup of tea.
So not only can you cast all 4 totems simultaneously, which also when it comes to totems, remember, each class gets their own style totem as well. So for Horde, for example, you know, Troll versus Orc, your totems aesthetically look a bit different. If I throw that in there, you're probably not bothered. But not only can you do that, you can also have 3 different sets. So you have Call of the Spirits, Call of the Ancestors, and Call of the Elements. So you could have your Call of the Elements set up maybe as having Stoneskin Totem, Flametongue Totem, Mana Spring Totem, and let's say Wrath of Air. So whenever you place this one, you know that it's probably going to be for your caster group, and you haven't got Devour in the group, for example. You could then change your Call of Ancestors to maybe be more melee focused, so you might have Strength of Earth. Maybe you need Frost Resistance, a Healing Stream Totem, and let's say that you would then want Windfury Totem as well. So now whenever you place this one in particular, this will be for your melee group. And of course, the last icon here is Totemic Recall, which gives you 25% of your mana, and it gets rid of all of them at the same time. These are abilities that are actually in your spellbook, so you can keybind them just straight on your bar if that's what you want to do, and then when you get rid of them, boom, all your totems are gone. It's just great. It's an amazing way for the totems to actually function now, which I'm sure if you've been playing a Shaman throughout Vanilla and TBC, you're going to love this. So we should probably first talk about some of the totem changes. Let's start with the Earth totems. Stoneskin Totem used to reduce melee damage taken, whereas now it increases armor. You could almost consider it the Shaman's Devotion Aura. Strength of Earth Totem now increases strength and agility, because Grace of Air Totem has basically been merged into this one totem, so you get strength and agility rather than strength from one totem and agility from another. Stoneclaw's had a very minor change where not only does it do the usual taunting mobs and has a 50% chance for them to be stunned for 3 seconds, it also now protects all of your other totems, causing them to absorb X amount of damage. Oh, and I should probably mention these totems now last 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes like they do in TBC as well. Other than things like Earthbind, Stoneclaw, those ones still obviously don't last 5 minutes, that would be broken. But the normal buffing totems like Stoneskin, Strength of Earth, etc., the ones that you're going to put down and leave down for the duration of a fight, as I say, they last 5 minutes now. When it comes to fire totems, not much worth noting other than the fact Fire Nova Totem has gone now. Instead, what you have is Fire Nova as an ability, which we will talk about very briefly when we get to the ability stage. But basically, as long as you've got a fire totem down, when you use Fire Nova, it will pulse around the totem to do the AoE. So now, any fire totem you've got down, you'll be able to just do that AoE pulse. The only significant change for the water totems is Cleansing Totem. So Cleansing Totem now removes 1 disease and 1 poison effect, and this is from party members only. The reason it's important that I mention that one specifically is party members only is because the buff totems are all now raid wide. So if you put Strength of Earth Totem down, for example, the strength and agility, everybody in the raid will get. But what you also need to consider is that you want the strongest buff. If you haven't seen my buffs and debuffs video up there, please do go check it out, because it explains why you need to be careful with what totems you place in, what Paladin blessings you're doing, because only the most effective one will count. So if you're using Strength of Earth, but you've got a DK in using Horn of Winter, then your Strength of Earth is wasted. You might as well use Stoneskin. But then if you've got a Paladin with Devotion Aura on, then you might as well use something else or use nothing at all. So you need to be careful with what totems you're placing and sort of plan ahead, you know, set your totem bar up based on what you know your raid composition is going to be. But yes, there's no more disease cleansing and poison cleansing, it's now just cleansing, which removes both but only from your party. This is one that's going to be quite annoying for you melee who absolutely love Windfury Totem, because Windfury Totem now is a flat 16% melee haste to all party and raid members. If you're an Enhancement Shaman, you'll probably take it improved, so that gives 20% haste. But again, you've just got to be careful when using this, because if you've got a DK bringing Icy Talons, which is 20% haste, you're not going to want to bother wasting putting this down. And when it comes to these, the only other thing worth mentioning is Windwall Totem's now gone, which, let's face it, Windwall Totem, are you really going to miss it? I wouldn't have thought so.
One that I should have mentioned in the restoration video, which I didn't, and I really should have because it's actually very relevant to every spec of Shaman, is Flametongue Totem. So Flametongue Totem in TBC does this, where it basically gives your party's main hand weapon an imbue, much like Flametongue Weapon does for you as the Shaman, giving X amount of damage on a weapon swing. Well, it doesn't do that anymore. It's now just flat spell power. It's not as good as like the Demo Warlock or the Elemental Shaman's Totem of Wrath, but it's still worth noting. And if you haven't got increased spell damage in your party, you're probably going to use this. So that's the main totem changes you need to know about. Now, there's two, I'm not going to say two specs, but there's two play styles to enhancement in Wrath of the Lich King, which may get you very excited. So you may have heard of the term Spell Enhance. So there's standard enhancement, which is going to use attack power weapons in both the main hand, the offhand. You'll have Windfury on your main hand, and you'll have Flametongue on your offhand. That's a standard enhancement Shaman. Now, Spell Enhance doesn't change massively in the play style. There are a couple of talents that become more required than optional, and there is a couple of changes in glyphs. And then a lot later down the line, there's changes to more items than just your main hand weapon. Due to the nature of how an enhancement Shaman plays, which we're going to get a lot more into when we look at the talents, but a lot of it's around spell power and spell damage. Your shocks, which are spells. Your lightning bolt, which you're going to be getting procs that you're going to be using, which are spells, as well as many others. So obviously having high amounts of spell power is really going to help you. And we've been able to get Fire Nova on such a short cooldown, and it's an ability that does a lot of damage. Actually getting tons of spell power as a Shaman is really, really good. So the main difference between enhancement, standard enhancement, and spell enhance is really your main hand weapon, and the fact that instead of using Windfury, you're going to be using double Flametongue. You use double Flametongue for more spell crit and a lot more spell power. And on the basis the main hand weapons have a ton of spell power, you can get sort of with a basic 200 eye level epic around 408 spell power plus. That's a big, big bang for your buck on your lightning bolt and on your shocks. Before we do get into the talents, I will say it's a very frantic and I would say even possibly difficult spec to play. You're pretty much pressing buttons all the time. You have to have incredibly fast fingers. Try not to say that's what she said joke. You've got Storm Strike, you'll be keeping Flame Shock up. You've got Lava Lash. You're going to be using Lightning Bolts or Chain Lightnings when you get Maelstrom procs. You're going to be keeping your Lightning Shield up all the time. You're going to be using Earth Shock if there's nothing else to press. You're going to be firing over and on cooldown. You know, there's just so many things. You're just going to be going bang, 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 like back to back, spamming abilities. It's a really, really fun playstyle, particularly Spell Enhance. And you might be thinking, well, which one's best? All of it will become a lot more clear when we're sort of in the Wrath of the Lich King beta, when it's an actual classic client, you know, going by private servers. I've been bit in the past where I've spoke about it in TBC and stuff like that. So I try to steer away from it a bit. But what I can tell you is Spell Enhance definitely has a higher cap of the amount of damage it can do. You'll find enhancement in tier 7, standard enhancement with Windfury and Flametongue using double agility weapons will sort of hit its peak of DPS a lot lower than Spell Enhance will. Spell Enhance seems to just have a bigger DPS range. So ultimately, Spell Enhance, even as early as tier 7, is probably the way to go. But let's jump into the talents and have a look at what's changed. We're only going to focus on the big ones that have changed, going from TBC, which this would be the TBC tree, into Wrath of the Lich King, which this will be the Wrath of the Lich King tree. There's lots of minor changes and lots of shuffling around, which I will briefly touch upon, but we're only really interested in the big changes to the talents. So if we're starting at the top, Ancestral Knowledge, for example, you get 2% intellect per point, giving 10% intellect, whereas it used to only give 5% of your maximum mana. Earth's Grasp is now in tier 1, which increases the health of your Stoneclaw totem by 25% and the radius of Earthbind totem by 10%, and reduces the cooldown of both totems by 15% with 2 points. This has actually, all it's done is moved from tier 2 in the Elemental tree in TBC into tier 1 in the Enhancement tree for Wrath of the Lich King. Enhancing Totems, which increases the effective strength of Earth and Flametongue totems by 5%, so with 3 points. Again, this has just been shuffled around and put up to 3 points instead of 2, because ordinarily you'd find this in the 3rd tier of TBC, increasing the damage done by your Strength of Earth and Grace of Air. So it wasn't Flametongue, but Grace of Air, as you know from the totem section of this video, is now combined with your Strength of Earth. The 2nd tier of talent stays mostly the same. Guardian Totems now increases the armor by your Stone Skin totem instead of damage reduction, because obviously the totem itself has changed. You still get the grounding totem effect. You still get your 5% crit. Improved Ghost Wolf remains the same, and now Improved Shields is not Improved Lightning Shield anymore. So you get the damage bonus to your Lightning Shield orbs, but it also increases the mana gain by Water Shield and healing with your Earth Shield, but that's more relevant for Resto. In Tier 3, Elemental Weapons has now just moved up. It's ordinarily a lot further down in the TBC tree to be able to go down to Storm Strike. Shamanistic Focus has changed ever so slightly. It now is just a flat-out mana cost reduction of your shocks by 45%, whereas after a crit, it used to reduce the cost of your next shock spell by 60%. So now that it's just a flat 45%, it's a lot better and a lot more reliable for your mana management. Anticipation's changed slightly. It's only 3 points now. It gives you the dodge still, but it also reduces the amount of time that you'll be disarmed, which can be nice for PvP. The next tier where you get Flurry remains exactly the same as it does in TBC, except for Toughness now gives stamina instead of armor. And something you'll notice when we look at the trees, you see straight away that the shield specialization talent has gone from Enhancement. You're not getting the bonus armor now from Anticipation. You know, they're stripping away that sort of strange tanking shaman talent system that was in through vanilla and TBC, which is a good thing. You're Enhancement, you're a DPS. You've still got Spirit Weapons, which gives you your parry and reduces your threat. That's still the same. You've got a new talent now, which has taken the place of Elemental Weapons, because Elemental Weapons, as mentioned, has moved up. Instead, now you get Mental Dexterity, which increases your attack power by 100% of your intellect for 3 points. Improved Windfury Totem adds 4% with 2 points to your Windfury Totem, and Windfury Totem is 16%, so this takes it up to 20%. Now, this is extremely important because if you've got a DK in the group with Icy Talons, their haste bonus that they bring to the raid is 20%, whereas yours without talent in this is 16%. So essentially, if you're always going to be raiding with a DK that's got the 20%, then you might not need to actually take this talent, but there will be situations, even if it's just in heroics and stuff, where the extra 4% you're going to want just for yourself. In the following tier, Unleash Rage has just moved, so it does exactly the same thing in terms of giving 10% attack power to your party. It only costs 3 points now, whereas in TBC it would cost 5 points, and it was a lot further down in the tree. But on top of this, you now get expertise as well, which is nice. Weapon Mastery, increasing your weapon damage by 10%, still remains the same, but now it only costs 3 points, whereas in TBC it costs 5. Now, this is a new talent which is definitely aimed at PvP, so it increases the damage done by your Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Lava Lash, and Shock spells by 5%. On targets afflicted by your Frostbrand attack, and your Frost Shock has a 50% chance to root the target in ice for 5 seconds when used on targets at or further than 15 yards from you. Now, with 2 points, this will be 10% extra damage, and it will have a 100% chance to root. Now, you can see how amazing this will be for someone trying to kite away from you. Taking this as a PvP Enhancement Shaman is almost a must. The following tier is exactly the same, so you get your 6% with your dual wield, and you get, obviously, your dual wield itself, as well as Storm Strike. The cooldown on Storm Strike compared to TBC is reduced, so it's 10 seconds in TBC, as you can see here, and it causes the next 2 sources of nature damage dealt to the target increase by 20%, whereas in Wrath, it's double that, so you get 4 additional attacks, increasing the spell damage of nature spells by 20%, on only an 8-second cooldown. Moving nicely down, you now get improved Storm Strike, which when you Storm Strike, you have a 100% chance to immediately grant you 20% of your base mana. So that's nice. You know, mana can be an issue, and it still can be an issue as spell hunts, especially in small group play like 5-man heroics or even 10-man. In 25-man, you tend to have a lot less mana issues, but like I said at the start, where you're going to be pressing so many abilities and pretty much spamming things on cooldown, that you can quickly run into mana issues if you haven't got things like Replenishment and Blessing of Wisdom or improved Mana Spring Totem down, things like that. You now get Lava Lash, so it charges your offhand with lava, instantly dealing 100% offhand weapon damage, and the damage is increased by 25% if your offhand weapon is enchanted with Flametongue, which it always will be, like I said at the start. Static Shock is a very nice one because this just gives you even more reason to be making sure that you manage your Lightning Shield really well and keeping it up all the time. So with 3 points, it will give you a 6% chance to hit your target with a Lightning Shield Orb charge when you deal damage with melee attacks and abilities, and your Lightning Shield gains 6 additional charges. Now, this is just flat out extra static damage. You know, you keep your static discharge, static damage, beautiful. You keep your Lightning Shield up for as long as it's up. When you're attacking, you've got a chance of doing some of your Lightning Shield Orb charges to the target. It's amazing. And you always want to be keeping it up. Mental Quickness isn't a new talent. It's actually just moved from the TBC tree, where it resides just above your dual wield specialization. And it does exactly the same thing in Wrath of the Lich King as well. So it reduces the mana cost of your instant cast spells by 2% per point and increases your spell power by an amount equal to 10% of your attack power. Shamanistic Rage has changed ever so slightly, but in a very relevant way. So in TBC, firstly, it reduces all damage taken by 30% and gives your successful melee attacks a chance to regenerate mana equal to 30% of your attack speed on a 2-minute cooldown lasting 15 seconds. Now, you probably can't see much difference, but it's half the amount of mana you get based on your attack power, but also half the cooldown. So every minute you can pop this, which is really nice, even if you're timing it to get the 30% damage reduction at the same time as getting your mana back. So you're using it as a more useful personal cooldown at the same time, an offensive cooldown to return mana to be able to cast more spells. And due to the tons more attack power you're actually going to get in Wrath of the Lich King, having it at 15% really doesn't matter. It's still an absolute ton of mana that you get back from it. Earthen Power is again a more PvP talent, but your Earthbind Totem pulses have a 50% chance to remove all snare effects from you and nearby friendly targets, and your Earthshock reduces enemy attack speed by an additional 5%. And you can put 2 points in this, so giving it a 100% chance to remove the snares, and a 10% that reduced enemy attack speed. As an Enhancement Shaman in Wrath of the Lich King, the PvP utility you actually get in your talents is really, really good. It's just a shame because you'd like to take some of them even for PvE, because they can be useful in certain circumstances, but unfortunately, there's just not enough points. Now, the big one that everyone will be excited about, well, all you Shamans will be excited about, Maelstrom Weapon. When you deal damage with a melee weapon, you have a chance to reduce the cast time of your next Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Lesser Healing Wave, Chain Heal, or Hex by 20%, and it stacks 5 times. Now, each point you put into this increases the chance of it actually proccing, so of course you want 5 points in this, but this is where you start pumping out your instant lightning bolts, and this is why haste is really important. This is why spell power is really important. You know, you're getting quick procs of Maelstrom Weapon, you're getting 5 stacks, you're doing big lightning bolts or chain lightnings. You'll be using a totem, as in, you know, your idle totem, in not your offhand, but the offhand. I don't know, easiest way to describe it. There'll be certain items that you'll use which look like they're built for elemental, but they're actually really useful for enhancement as well. And as I say, this totem would be one of them. And then you get your Feral Spirits, which the easiest way to talk about Feral Spirit was just to show you. So I've quickly respec'd enhancement, and then boom. So you get these 2 little beasts that are going to do some damage for you, but they've also got some really cool abilities. So you get Bash, which your Spirit Wolves stun the target for 2 seconds. That's on a 45-second cooldown. You also get Spirit Walk, which removes all movement impairing effects and increases the movement speed of you and your Spirit Wolves by 60%. So it's nice having a sprint with your Wolves. They also get like a Feral Charge, which is just Spirit Wolf Leap. And finally, they get Twin Howl, so they howl, forcing all enemies to attack them for 6 seconds. You can toggle any of these abilities on or off, and overall, they're just really cool. They do good damage, getting that 60% sprint, so while you got your cooldown up, which is them, you know, you're getting that extra movement speed. You've got a stun that you can control yourself, you know, if there's a target that's going to need locking down, for example. Overall, just a really cool spell. When it comes to the elemental tree, there's not massive changes. You've still got Convection and Concussion, which reduces the mana cost of certain abilities and increases the damage done by others. You know, all pretty boring stuff. As an Enhancement Shaman, you're probably going to get Elemental Devastation, which are non-periodic offensive spell crits will increase your chance to get a critical strike with melee attacks. You're going to be using Lightning Bolt a lot, as I say, from Maelstrom Weapon, so that's going to be useful. Call of the Flame, increasing the damage done by your fire totems and Fire Nova by 5% per point, and increases the damage done by your Lava Burst spell. We're not bothered about Lava Burst, that's for Elemental, but we will cover that in a second when we get to the new abilities. Elemental Focus, which after landing a non-periodic critical strike with Fire, Frost or Nature spells, you enter a clear casting state, and the clear casting state reduces the mana cost of your next 2 damage or healing spells by 40%. Elemental Fury, increasing the critical strike damage bonus of your Searing and Magma totems and your Fire, Frost and Nature spells by 20%. 100% with 5 points. And then a very important one for Spellhance, which is improved Fire Nova Totem. And it can even be important for non-Spellhance, just standard enhancement, who doesn't have mana issues, because you'll still be using this on cooldown. But it increases the damage done by your Fire Nova by 10% and reduces the cooldown by 2 seconds. So you can put 2 points in this. Now, if you combine this with the Glyph of Fire Nova, which we will get into in the Glyph section anyway, it reduces the cooldown of your Fire Nova by 3 seconds, making your Fire Nova ability a 3-second cooldown. And remember, this hits everyone around the totem when you're doing it. It can be massive, massive AoE. New ability-wise, outside of what you get from talents as enhancement, you don't get that much. And that's why I said in the intro at the beginning, you know, all that's really happened in Wrath of the Lich King is enhancement has been refined from TBC. It's not like they've thrown loads of new abilities into your spellbook that comes outside of talents. Yes, you get Lava Lash, you get Spirit Wolves, you know, but these all come from talents. They're not what the shaman gets. You know, they're what enhancement shamans get specifically. Now, a couple of new abilities that we can briefly mention just so you know what you get. You get Lava Burst, but that's going to be for Elemental, and we'll talk about that a lot more in the Elemental video. You now get Hex, which transforms the enemy into a frog. While Hex, the target cannot attack or cast spells. Damage caused may interrupt the effect and it lasts 30 seconds. Now remember, this works with Maelstrom Weapon as well, so if there is a priority target that needs CCing, the one that really springs to mind where this is extremely useful is on fights where your friends can get mind controlled. So using a Hex on the mind controlled target, as long as people are not, massively cleaving, it can take the odd hit and still not break. So that can be really useful there. You get Earth Living Weapon as well, which you're never going to use because that's for Resto Shamans. And quite honestly, that's about it. So you know the abilities you're going to get, you know how the talents have changed, you know about Spell Enhance versus Enhancement, what the differences are, you know all the totems, that are like all the changes to the totems that you've got. So lastly, let's just look at some useful glyphs. I'm not going to go through all the glyphs, but if you don't know, glyphs get introduced in the pre-patch of Wrath of the Lich King, and they're made by inscription. So a scribe will make them, which is the new profession that also gets introduced, hopefully in the pre-patch, but definitely in Wrath of the Lich King. Glyphs can do, well, one of many things. I was going to say one of two, but one of many things. So you've got major glyphs and you've got minor glyphs. Minor glyphs normally do things like removing the reagents of certain spells, or maybe reducing the cooldown of a movement speed increase in effect. They're normally quite minor, and then that's why they're called minor glyphs. And then major glyphs, or it could just be flat out damage to an ability. It could slightly change the way an ability works. It could increase the amount of charges of something. It can change an ability in quite a meaningful way. So let's have a look at the ones that are relevant for enhancement. So because I mentioned it already, we might as well start off with Glyph of Fire Nova, which reduces the cooldown of your Fire Nova spell by 3 seconds. The reason this is really good, because paired with the talent that reduces the cooldown of Fire Nova, and the fact that you're going to just be spamming this on cooldown, 3 seconds of just passive AoE, but also what you're using for single target, just means when any ads pop up, odds are you're going to be able to AoE them, because a 3-second cooldown is just such a short space of time that this glyph, specifically for Spell Enhance, is very, very good. You might choose not to use it as standard enhancement, but for Spell Enhance, you wouldn't play without it. You've then got Glyph of Feral Spirit, which your Spirit Wolves gain an additional 30% of your attack power, and this can be good because they last 45 seconds, and they do actually do reasonably good damage. Then we've got Glyph of Storm Strike, which increases the nature damage bonus of your Storm Strike ability by an additional 8%, so this will put it from 20% to 28%. So this is a must-have, because this is basically 8% extra damage to your Lightning Bolt, your Chain Lightning, your Earth Shock, whatever ability you're using at the time. You then got Glyph of Windfury Weapon, which increases the chance per swing to trigger Windfury Weapon. Now, this is one which you might choose not to use because you're probably going to be Spell Enhanced, so this would be the one that you drop for Fire Nova Totem. Glyph of Lightning Bolt simply increases the damage dealt by your Lightning Bolt by 4%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 4% of an ability that you're going to be using quite a lot is just some nice static damage. Really, the last one I would say is Glyph of Flame Shock, which increases the critical strike damage bonus of your Flame Shock damage by 60%. You're going to be using Flame Shock a lot. Well, when I say a lot, you're going to be keeping it on the target at all times. So you are going to be casting it frequently. In post-edit, I realised that I forgot Flametongue Weapon. What an absolute noob. If you're Spell Enhanced, you're probably going to be using this. Minor glyph-wise, you've got Glyph of Water Shield, which increases the number of charges on your Water Shield by 1. Really, for Resto, you're probably not going to use that. Glyph of Renewed Life is one that pretty much every shaman's going to use. This is a minor glyph, and it removes the reagent of your Reincarnate, so obviously never having to worry about reagents to Ankh is very nice. You've also got Astral Recall, which reduces the cooldown of your Astral Recall spell by 7.5 minutes, which again, when it's already only on a 15-minute cooldown, having a 7.5-minute cooldown Hearthstone is very nice. Could be a bit overkill though. And then you get Water Walk-In or Water Breathing. They could be another option where they basically remove the reagent cost of either Water Breathing or Water Walk-In, or both if you choose to use both glyphs. When it comes to the minor ones, really, it's entirely up to you. I think Reincarnate is an absolute must. And I'm quite a big fan of Astral Recall as well, actually, just because 7.5-minute cooldown Hearthstone, pretty OP. And I think that's about where I want to leave it. I mean, Enhancement Shaman, as I say, overall, absolutely amazing in Wrath of the Lich King. Really good fun. Not just fun. Anytime there's even 2, 3, 5, 10 ads, little ads, big ads, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're passively cleaving all the time. Start using Chain Lightning on your Maelstrom procs instead of Lightning Bolt. If there's a few targets, that's even more damage. Fire Nova every 3 seconds. It's crazy. Using Magma Totem as well, so you'd have Magma Totem down, Pulse AoE in, while you're spamming Fire Nova to AoE even more. I mean, they are really, really strong when it comes to cleave. But their single target is really up there as well. And as I say, you've got 2 choices between Enhancement or Spell Enhance. Really probably going to come down to what the best weapon is. You know, if you get Calamity's Grasp, which is the weapon from KT, so we're talking tier 7, if you get the actual agility weapon, you might choose to just play normal enhancement. If you got Wrath Strike, which is Spellcaster main hand, you might decide to play Spellhance. But ultimately, I would say Spellhance pulls ahead a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one, which will be Elemental Shaman.